Hey folks, we're going to go over the Navionics app. So again, I look at this as a bonus video, going over the charts and everything, and there'll be links to like this video and everything in the presentation. But yeah, the Navionics, this is what we're looking at. This is the icon, the latest icon that they have, and everything. This is the one you want, the boating app. And then what you do is you end up, like when you load it, you end up being able to track all, look at this. Like these are the 23, this is like the trip number it was in the year. So July 12th, this was my 26th trip out on the water. And this is like a fishing date that that's what I titled it, fishing with my kiddo, fishing with my friend and my kiddo, and so first keeper fluke. So I'm kind of using this, but here's the thing. I can click on any one of these and I can get the actual track that I took in real time. I can see how long the trip was, how fast I was going, how long it was in a distance. This is just a tiny bit of it, but it's been recording all of my trips for the past 5 years. If you set it, and so if you have it set for relief shading, you're going to get an awesome set of tools. Let's just look at the race here. So we'll look at all of Long Island Sound. We're going to look at the Race, Plum Gut, Hatchett's Reef, the Connecticut River, Long Sand Shoal, and 6 Mile Reef. We're going to look at those. And by decoding these and showing you how I use this app, so this is not only like how do I use this app, it's also a little bit of like how do I fish these spots. When we look at it, so we're gonna go in here to the Race. All right, so now you can see this is my downloaded portion of their maps. Out here, these are not downloaded on my phone, but all of these other ones are stored on my phone, so I don't have to like wait for it to load. It's in the memory of the phone. And if I didn't have that relief shading set on, I would just get all of these, which these are handy. This tells me that there's drop-offs here and here and here, and there's these contour lines when they're really close together. These are spots that I'm looking for. It's either going to be a high spot or a low spot. When we're looking at stuff like this. So when I'm looking at this, I know that this is a high spot, and like the lines out here are going, and so this is like another little high spot. But then the lines go down to a low spot. So anyway, let's dive in with relief shading on. Look at this. Okay, so the color coding is helpful. If you're colorblind, it does kind of stink, but there is some shading here anyway. The yellows and everything, I have this set for like different depths. Yellows in general are 40 feet. And then if you were to get into some reds and stuff like that, that's going to be like less than 20 feet. But so when we look at this, so ignore all my like little fish things. A lot of these, I haven't cleaned them up, but a lot of these are just like me saying, hey, where'd I catch a fish? Where'd I catch a fish? I fished this so much that like I've stopped keeping track of those because they take up room on the map. We're going to zoom into this area right here. This is like this middle grounds area, the green can that's out there. And what I want you to see is just this structure. As the tide is going in and out, let's just back out one. You see this arrow here? I could click on that in the app and it's going to give me the, not the tide, it's going to give me the current flow. And that's more important. It's more important to have the current speed in a dangerous spot like this than it is to have the tide. Because whenever high tide is, it doesn't matter. It's when does the current flip. Tide is just a measure of like how high the water actually gets and how low the water gets. This is a measurement here and here of the speed of the water. And so right here we're looking at an outgoing current when I took the screenshot at, and it's like full outgoing. This would typically not be a time when I'm fishing it. I would want the current to be like halfway, up to halfway. This whole thing gets colored and everything. I'll show you that later. But anyway, look at what we've got here. As the water's rushing out, what you're going to have just past this structure. By the way, this is huge. Look at this. We got 1/10 of a mile here. So, like we've basically got like almost a mile worth of structure right in this spot. And you're like one itty bitty boat. There's all these little pockets and holes that fish go in and everything. There's so much structure to look for here. I'll tend to come in, and what I'll do is I'll just kind of zigzag until I see something on the bottom that interests me. And again, I'm coming in somewhere, typically about 45 minutes before slack and about 45 minutes after slack is about that hour and a half window that I can usually fish in here. And I could do bottom fishing. I could fish for giant porgies and sea bass. I've never caught a fluke out here, but people do catch fluke out here when they're migrating in and out. But anyway, look at this. This is about 200 feet deep, and then it rises up to about 20 something feet in some of these areas, 20, 30 feet. So there's a huge volume of water. Remember, the entire sound comes in and out through this opening and the Watch Hill opening and here through Plum Gut. But the Race is the biggest opening where water is rushing in and out. And so you get all of that water that floods up here, and so you get giant standing waves that you don't really want to put your boat into. You want to be able to catch your fish, reel it up, get it in the boat and netted before you really get into those standing waves out here. Or at least you want to be able to have somebody at the helm to be able to put it in gear and stem the tide and hold yourself before those standing waves toss you about and everything. It's not to say that you can't go into them, but it's like you don't want to go into them the wrong way. So again, the Race here, a lot of effort is focused in this spot because it's a very fishable. Look at those depths in the 20 to 40 feet or so, very fishable. And some of these other depths that are about 80 feet somewhere in here, you can drop a diamond jig down here again and drop a high-low rig, drop a three-way rig in here, fishing for stuff. There's just tons of structure. Orient Point, a Plum Gut. So again, without the relief shading on, we're going to see lots of structure. And look at all my pins here. You'll see that I've used this app I've clicked on every single one of these rocks. And if it's 3 feet, 3 feet from the surface or less, I mark it with one of these warning signs for me, so that as I'm navigating through this, I know don't you dare get your prop near this, because if you have a wave that's rising up and then going down, you could hit your prop on any one of those rocks. So that's what you're seeing here with those reds. And then again, I've stopped recording all of the fish that I catch in these areas, but you've got lots of rocky stuff out here, lots of sandy stuff out here, and lots of drop-offs, sandy drop-offs and everything where you can fish for fluke. Let's zoom into the gut itself. So this middle ground area here where it rises up, this is all bedrock that's been scoured out. Again, with the Ice Age, we had that like little mini lesson. Over here, we got like a sandy bottom area, sandbar area, and you got the lighthouse. You will see birds all day long in this area. And so here's the thing: if this video is meant to go along with fishing for porgies, fluke, and sea bass and stuff like that. When I'm looking at this, I've caught fluke over here in this little sandy area. This is a drop off that goes from about 20, 30 feet down to 100. And no, I don't have a picture of it. I think this down here is like 190 feet deep. It's almost 200 feet deep. But a lot of people, we fish this drop off. And at different times of the year, fish migrate through this. This is a huge migration pinch point. And bait migrate through here. So you will find sea bass on this rocky area, porgies in this rocky area. But again, this is another one of those areas where I think down over here, there's one of those arrows that shows the current and everything. And you want to click on that. And you want to, like on the outgoing or on the incoming, you want to make sure that you're like avoiding going in here when it's ripping and when it's got its strongest tides. For ground fish, for bottom fish. If you're fishing for stripers and for blues, you kind of want some of that current to be pushing them and everything. And actually, most of these little dots, most of these tags are for stripers and bluefish and everything. It's just me saying, hey, there's some cool structure here. But again, don't go by mine. Find your own spots. There's spots within spots here that I haven't even tagged that are just amazing. And the fleet is always going to be like lined up here. All the boats are going to be lined up here. Just migrate out a little bit. You will find fish that they are not finding. So that's just a little bit on Plum Gut and everything. and Hatchett's Reef. So Hatchett's Reef is really close to me, and you might see a fishing report seeing that people are catching stuff out at Hatchett's Reef. And so this is the reef itself, and it comes up to about, I think, about 12 feet or so deep. It's fully submerged and everything. You're not going to hit it with your prop or anything as you're going by, but fully safe to go by. You can hit one of the cans, but you're not going to hit the reef itself. And I love fishing these end parts here, where the water kind of wraps and pushes around. I catch, that's where I catch fluke and stuff like that on these little drop offs. So this is all sandy out here, and then it's rocky. You got to snag. So I like to drop maybe like a 3-way rig in here and drag that little sandy bit, drag it through the sandy rocky stuff, and that's where we'll catch fluke on this side or out on this side, on the incoming and outgoing. So the water will come in this direction and go out in that direction. Here's the thing though, is that when people say they're catching stuff at Hatchett's Reef, it could be any of this. Here's the reef itself, but somebody might be like, yeah, I got it out at Hatchett's Reef, but they might be fishing for a tog or something like that right in the little rocky piles up here at Hatchett's Point. There's all of these little rock piles and everything here that are amazing for fluke. Basically drop your boat right at the rock pile and then drift the area just after the rock pile, and that's a great way to catch fluke. And so teaching you that here, looking at that structure, is another. I don't think I got the close up because I got the Kelsey Point 6 Mile Reef close ups we'll talk about. But look at all these rocky spots out here. These are deeper, about 80 foot, 100-foot deep, where again, you can start shallow, see if you find anything, work your way deeper and deeper and deeper. Whether you're going for blackfish, for trying to find schools of porgies, or for fluke and everything, there's plenty of rocks in here that early in the spring, between the rocks, there's sandy spots that you drag a 3-way rig down through those sandy spots, and you're going to catch some nice fluke in those areas. And then late season, you'll have fluke that are up in this area, still feeding on sand, not sand, feeding on silver sides and stuff like that are keeping closer to shore, but they're going to be in like these little rocky areas that are adjacent to that. They'll be migrating in and out with the tide, and catching the stuff that's sweeping around. This point doesn't look like a lot, but it's enough that when water comes here, it pushes it out. And because you also got hatchets here, you have like this big funneling of water that happens in that spot. That's funneling bait. And so just, again, don't worry where the boats are. Find your own little rock, find your own little sandy spot, your own little drop off. There's so much structure here. I have no fear of like giving away a secret, because like there's no secrets here. Everybody knows that this is just like the whole of Long Island Sound. There's going to be people fishing here. There's going to be people fishing everywhere. Find a spot that's your own spot, that's not getting hit, and you'll catch fish. All right, so going to the Connecticut River area, what I want you to notice is look at all these current. So while this one is just starting to pick up, these are starting to drop off in intensity. That's what the blue means, is that they're losing intensity on this outgoing. But this one, the Connecticut River, has been flooding, and it's now like picking up, and increasing in its outflow. The current speeds here are going to be different than the current speeds here and the current speeds all the way out here. Again, look at this, 0.8 miles. So we got multiple miles of sandy bottom right here. Again, for fluke, look at the drop-offs that are right here. Drop off here and then dropping into this like bowl area here, where there's tons of rocky, sandy structures everywhere. You got Cornfield Point. That's going to be a spot where a pinch point where you can catch sea bass right there, find some rocks. Sea bass, porgies, flukes, they're going to be everywhere in this spot. So again, like one thing that I like to do is, like, since I'm coming from this side, is I like to find like these first like little drop offs over here, and I'll fish shallow and then work my way deeper down to this like about 80 to 100-foot depth area where there's massive sand waves down here, and see where I can catch some early season fluke. Later season, you're going to find fluke all in this. You're going to find fluke up into the Connecticut River, in the flats and everything, and in the drop-offs for this channel. You don't have to go very far to catch fluke, because this, not only is it bringing a lot of fresh water, but there's a lot of salt water flowing in here, to make this a big brackish Again, estuary, tons of structure. That's what I'm seeing. You see boats here. It's like, yeah, there might be fish there, but just look at all this area that you can go to and find your own little spot, your own little drop offs. Now let's go into an area that, oh yeah, yeah. So this is just an example of, you've got sand waves up here in the shallow water where it's like, again, maybe like 20 feet deep, and then you've got massive sand waves all the way down here where it's past this 70, 80 foot mark, where it's more than 100 feet deep. And these sand waves right here, these are hundreds of feet apart. The crest and the trough. So each one of these waves is going to be and again, same thing. Each one of these waves is going to have a crest and a trough. They're going to have spots where fluke are going to be waiting and ambushing prey. So I'm not fishing here for porgies and everything. This is, I look at like a big sandy fluke hot spot. Okay, the whole season long. All right, so I decided to look at like Kelsey Point. This is not a point that I fish off, and just because it's further from where I have my boat. But I want to go through this and be like, how would I look at this structure? So, if it's early on in the season, I'm going to be trying to find fish. Where are they? So I'm going to be starting in here in the shallows, seeing if I find anything, working and just finding a line of rocks and working my way out to deeper and deeper water, going to, starting in at maybe like 20 feet, working to some 30, 40 feet areas, drift, and then again, looking at the sonar, seeing, do I see any bait anywhere? Early season, there's not a ton of bait necessarily that you're going to find in spots, but if you do, that's a spot to hang around and stay there. We've also got some sandy bits and stuff like that. So we've got rocks, we got sand. And this is the end of Long Sand Shoal. We got a lot of different structure for all three of our target species here. The porgy sea bass and fluke. And so here, let's dive in. This is the part of the video where I talk about planning a trip. So when you click on one of these little arrows in Navionics, you get the current speeds, in knots and everything. So I'm looking at this and going, okay, maybe I'm going to go out sometime afternoon. So if I look at this and I go, okay, so around 11:41, basically the tide is just about slack. It's just started to turn. So this wave is saying like the water is, so right here, the water is slack, and then it's outgoing, and then it slows down, and then it's slack again, and then the arrow switches, goes the other direction, then it's incoming. So the water would be going this direction. It's important to kind of like look at your structure and imagine, where are fish going to be according to that structure. If the water is outgoing like this in this direction, then I want to start right on that rock or just ahead of it. I want to start just ahead of that rock and then drift just past it, and then reset my drift. While if it's going the other direction, I want to like start on the other side of the rock and everything. So I want you to look at this as we go to the next screen. So here's where it's just about slack, and it's 11:41. We look at this, and so that's not that many minutes later. So we're about 15 minutes later. This is now like, it goes from slack, and then in 15 minutes, now we're in a target where it's like, okay, sometime around noon is where I'd want to get here by, because the current's starting to pick up, and fish are going to start feeding. They're not really going to be feeding in these like slack times. And I look at this 1.9, and it's like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to hold bottom at that speed. Maybe not. It's going to take some experimenting with some leads and everything, but I can see my maximum outgoing current speed there and my maximum incoming current speed here. So I could look at this and be like, okay, well, every 6 hours, it's going to switch from outgoing to incoming, and then outgoing. So this is a 12-hour block here. And let's see that as we go from here to where it's maxed out. And then we go to, here's where I would look at and be like, well, that cycle from basically about noon to 5:30, that would be a full outgoing cycle to fish. So if I'm looking, now it's not a full cycle, but it's a full outgoing current. It's like part of a tide here. And so if I'm planning a trip and everything, and maybe I got kids on board or something like that, I'd be planning this trip and being like, all right, well, that would be I know that I could wrap things up around that time and then head inland. But what if I wanted to start fishing into the dark or something like that? Well, we can see right here at 9:30 at night. You got some summer nights where you could still have some light back there. Well, the tide is going to switch, and somewhere in here, it's going to go from slack and it's going to go to incoming. And maybe the bite was horrible here. It might be worth hanging in a couple hours, or an hour or so for it to switch back over, and then fishing a couple of hours of this. But you can see again, you got basically from here, this slack to the next outgoing slack. Where the next outgoing starts again, you've got about a 12-hour period of time. All right. And from day to day, if this one was noon, the next day, I know that it would be about 45 minutes. I think 45 minutes later is when that would start. All right, let's go in. So let's go into some spots. So we got all of this. I just dropped this pin here to be like, okay, this area here is about 60 feet. So that means we're at like maybe 40 feet for some of these rocky spots, really shallow over here, about 20 feet or so. And then these blues here again are somewhere 60 to 80 feet or so. We don't have any of the dark blues of like 100 feet deep. And so if I haven't been on the water in a while, I am going to start shallow. So I'm looking at, I think this is like Duck Island or something like that, out in Westbrook. And so I would be starting somewhere shallow and I look at this. This is telling me it's a rocky bottom, rocky bottom, rocky bottom. All of this stuff is rocky stuff. Out here, probably sandy stuff. And the stuff in between the rocks, probably sandy out here, but rocky, 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 rocky. When I look at this, I would start fishing in this 20 some odd foot depth with a high-low rig. Do it, and so if the tide was going this way, I'd drift and do a drift and see do I catch anything. Then I'd power up and I'd swoop over here. And if I wanted to like drift by this can, I would swoop over here and then stop my boat right about here and then start my drift. See, do I catch anything in that area? And then cover ground. So if I didn't catch anything here, I'm going to pick it up. And I'm going to go maybe to the end of this rocky little underwater point here. That's the way I look at this. This is a little... So if I didn't catch anything at this beginning of this point and somewhere in the middle and somewhere at the end, well, then I'm gonna pick it up and I'm going to go a little deeper. So again, if this is early in the season, so again, maybe I fish that point, then maybe what I'm going to start doing is, if I'm not, confident that I'm going to catch sea bass, I might fish in between rocky spots, these sandy, look at that S, that's sand, these sandy spots, and fish a rig down in here, because the fluke won't be on the rocks themselves like the sea bass and porgies will be. They will be down in the areas adjacent to it. So fluke will be in here, ready to pounce on stuff as water's coming up and over here and down and bringing bait down to them. They'll be down in here. Ooh, in between these rocks, definitely. This is like a little highway for fluke to come up and in during the current, stay low underneath the rocks, but then have food swept around here to them. And if the current was going in the other direction, will I be fishing just this side of it? Maybe I might fish in here and hope I catch a drift that brings me in here, or I might start here and drift straight in here. Each drift and the wind is all going to be different, so I'm going to watch, am I drifting in this diagonal direction, or am I drifting straight this way, or am I drifting this way? The wind can really throw off a drift and everything, and so if I wanted to target this spot right here, because I feel like this is a fluke highway, and maybe there's in here, and maybe there's sea bass at the end here, I might approach it here, hoping to drift into it, or here, hoping to drift into it, or here. I might have to start here, and then the current and the wind takes me into that spot. So again, watch your drifts and look which direction, and help use that to predict the next one as you reset. Now, as I'm looking for fish, so like I said, I'd probably come over to here, and I look at this as like, this is like a hill, and this is like a hill. If this is like 50 feet or so deep, oh, it's 66 feet deep. This is probably 20 feet higher, and this is about 20 feet higher. You imagine that. That's like a tall building here and a tall building here, and this is an alley in between them. All right. This is a hot spot. So these are places that you want to target. However, I'm also like painting the rocks too. If I do catch fish in this area, oh boy, I am going to drift all over this spot until I find the spot that has the fish. So I might then move over here, and then I might go out deeper to some of these other rocks out here. And again, just looking at this one, I took a picture here to be like, okay, this is about 50 feet, but then you drop down another 20 feet or so. Look at this, 80 feet down here, 50 there, 80 down here, and then it's sloping up, 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 up. So if the current is going this way, it's going to be sloping up, increasing pressure in here and feeding whatever would be going in that direction, or whatever would be lying in here. Look at that. That's like a little hole in here after like a little pop up in a little hole. So I might be, again, targeting a drift that would bring me right in here and then maybe right in here and trying to dial it in and finding where are the fish in the, I really am, when I'm not on the water for a long period of time, I am often doing these trips where I'm just trying to find the fish. Now, if I had been out the day before and I found the fish out in this depth, I'm going to ignore all of the land stuff out here, and I'm going to go try to find stuff that is out in that same general depth, because that same general depth is going to have the same general temperature, same rough thermocline out there, keeping the fish in that spot. So day after day, if I'm fishing for a week solid, I will generally stay in the same depth, but I'll be hitting different rocks. Here's the thing about, so fluke and stuff, they'll travel and they'll move, so there's a little bit of luck in finding them. Just because they're in one spot one day, they're not going to be in the same spot, so that's why you got to move around. Same thing with porgies and with sea bass, you got to move around. Here's the thing with sea bass is that sea bass will generally stick near a group of rocks for a chunk of time in the spawning season, in the early season, because the males kind of have a harem and everything. All of the sea bass are born female, and then some of them, when there aren't enough males around, turn into males. And so what you'll have is here you might have a group of, maybe 100 females or something, and then maybe, less than a dozen males or so, each willing to fertilize the group of females that are huddled around it. And they are very aggressive. So I might pick up a male here and I might pick up a male here, but they are kind of guarding their their little harem of fish in their areas. And here's the thing, if I caught a really good keeper male here, and I caught another good keeper male here and here or whatever, I feel like I probably picked this rock off of all of the good males that are in that area. And so I'm going to be fishing other rocks looking for, again, more of those bigger keeper fish. So that, again, this is, again, a video just kind of talking about what's my thought process in approaching, and a big part of my thought process is bouncing from rock to rock to rock. And in the early season with fluke, I am looking for these highways here, these highways before the fluke come up in the shallower ground. So I'm looking for those sandy bottoms and everything adjacent to, next to the rocks. Later in the season, I am also looking for, maybe not this deep. I don't have a picture, but maybe this deep. I'll be looking for fluke in these sandy areas next to these maybe shallower rocks and stuff like that. Or look at this. That is quite a drop off. This, I didn't even look at that later, but look at that. Again, this is 62 feet, goes down to 96. This is a 30-foot hump right up here. And you can see by the relief shading that's used here, you can definitely see that is absolutely a drop-off, that if the water was going incoming, I would be fishing there. While water's going outgoing, I look at that little drop-off. I might be trying to target that more often than this gradual slope here. So that's, again, like another thing that I'm looking at. I'm looking at which side is the side that has the steeper drop off, and fish that will be over here, they'll migrate, at the slack tide to other areas and set up on the other side of these rocks, or just on top of the rocks, after it's cresting over, as bait's coming up and over. And, don't neglect little rocks like this. And out here, these little rocks out here, the boats might be out in these areas. Nobody's fishing over here. This might be worth a spot. It might be worth you finding your own spot. Maybe this little hump over here doesn't look like a rock here, but maybe this hump is just loaded with porgies and everything. Loaded, and the areas around it might have, again, look at this, high point, and a little dip in between. I look at that as like a little highway that I'd be fishing for fluke. Okay, this video is probably long enough as it is, but I wanted to make one that's just like a little more in-depth, kind of going over some of the spots that I like to fish, like the Race and Plum Gut and Bartlett's Reef. not Bartlett's, Hatchett's Reef, and the Long Sand Shoal at the mouth of the Connecticut River. Again, like I don't feel I'm giving away any spots. These are all huge spots that are like miles long. You and all your friends can come out to these spots and fish, and there's gonna be plenty of fish in all of these spots. Same thing with 6 Mile Reef. I ain't giving anything up. Everybody knows that this is a hot spot for structure. Now you find the You don't have to take your boat and travel halfway across the state to find this. You find your own spot within Long Island Sound, and you're anywhere in Long Island Sound, close to shore, you're going to find rocky spots, sandy spots, and bedrock spots. More bedrock is out in this area, though, because of the water that rushed out. You're not necessarily going to find those deep bedrock spots in the inner Sound. But yeah, you can see this is the location that I generally fish. This is my radius. This is like my home port right here, and I pop on out, rip in all these directions. I'm not going to be burning gas to go too far, That's why I'm not going to be going out to New Haven. Why go out there when I can find fish within 5 minutes from where I've got my boat? So if you're out here in New Haven, you got a boat, go ahead, find your 5 minutes. Your rocks, your piles, and everything within 5 minutes of where you are. You're out here by Westerly. Oh my God, you got tons of structure, Fisher's Island, and everything like that. Mystic, find your own like little spots. You're there. We're not fighting for the same water. If we were fishing on shore and had land access issues and everything, yeah, you don't want to burn spots that way. But we're out on the water with a boat. You can kind of go anywhere you want. All right, take care, folks. Tight lines. Good luck.